You're focused on making important decisions to take your company to the next level. But who's counting? We are. Counting on trends and insight to move your business forward, operationally and strategically. Focused on helping executives achieve their highest potential. But Who's Counting is a podcast shedding light on and breaking down critical issues and opportunities for businesses. Brought to you by Anders CPAs and Advisors.
So Missy, what did you think of our conversation today with Stefanie?
I loved it. And there were two things that really stuck out to me that I immediately wrote down. One was when she was talking about the impact of diversity and inclusion on innovation and the fact that the greatest innovation comes from having a diverse group. And I believe the words she used were innovating from the edges, which was a really cool visual for me. Secondly, she mentioned that when there is an innovation or there's an idea, the first thing that we should do is ask why. What's the impact? And then to broaden our lens and try to see it from a big picture perspective and in the context of how it can be used. And that is something that I think could be done every day.
Yeah, I've known Stefanie for a while, but I'd never heard the $2 million mistake story. So that was one of my favorites from this episode. And she talks a lot about her observations on AI and sort of how technology is going to play a role going forward. So I thought it was a great conversation as well. Enjoy this conversation with Stefanie Thelen.
Today we're joined by Stefanie Thelen. She is the Chief Innovation Officer for Object Computing, which is a consulting firm combining technology and strategy to help businesses discover new business horizons. Prior to joining Object Computing, Stefanie held executive leadership positions at global consulting firms such as Slalom, CSC Consulting, Capgemini, and Ernst & Young. In addition to her work fueling growth of hundreds of businesses, Stefanie has been an active supporter of Arch Grants, a St. Louis-focused nonprofit organization providing equity-free grants for pro bono support services to early-stage startups. Arch Grants hosts an annual equity-free $75,000 global startup competition with the goal of igniting ingenuity and innovation. Welcome to the But Who's Counting podcast, Stefanie.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and good morning.
So you have worked in technology most of your career. How did that get started for you?
So I'm kind of a geek by personality and an engineer by education. So
software engineer, or what kind of engineer?
Not software, industrial and civil. So I love to geek out on neural networks, and believe it or not, I have strange minors in packaging machinery and neural networks. So,
wow.
I've never met anyone with those minors.
You're right. That's impressive.
And also leadership communications. So those were kind of the things I went into in engineering school. But I found my way to consulting with the intention of leveraging the experience broadly across industries and business functions to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it turns out what I wanted to be when I grew up was a consultant. I found a ton of joy in just, it's dynamic and fast paced, and I learn something new every day. But I also think, I'm a people lover and was raised to really operate in service to other people. And consulting, I believe, is a really noble profession in that regard, because you are always listening first and always seeking to understand and operating in service to others. Always selling, never buying is another way to think of it. So I found a lot of fulfillment and growth in my career.
So did you start out in consulting? Just right out of the gate, you were in consulting?
I did.
Wow.
I spent a hot minute at the Missouri Department of Transportation in several different roles, and then a hot minute thinking that I wanted to go to law school and be a patent attorney. But with one internship in both veins, then I was fortunate enough to start my career the same place Dave spent some time at Ernst & Young, early days and was part of the acquisition when Capgemini acquired the management consulting business from E&Y.
I love the comment you just made on internships, because one of the things that I tell my kids, but then I also tell anybody that's just starting out their careers, I'm like, do as many internships as you can, because you will learn what you like and what you don't like. And what you just said is a great example of, I'm going to try these couple of things. I don't like them, but you found your thing. And I think that's great. That I think that's just such a valuable experience for people to do. So anyway, so Stefanie, thank you for being here today. So our theme for season 3 on the podcast is innovation. So part of what we like to do is to talk to people about their innovation journeys and kind of, how they've gotten to where they are, and then share tips and tricks for our listeners so that maybe there's some mistakes you've made along the way that our listeners won't have to. So one of the things, so at Object Computing, where you're at today, your role is Chief Innovation Officer. So most middle market clients that we work with don't necessarily have that role. So I guess talk to us about that role, what that means for you, and then how does that fit with the other members of the executive team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is not a role that existed prior to my introduction to our founder, Ibrahim Moshiri, and his daughter, who is our CEO, Gina Bremer, both phenomenal humans. But what's so interesting and what is so exciting for me about object computing is that my favorite thing that I've ever done in my career across different organizations has included working really closely with what CSC would have called distinguished architects, but just systems thinkers, brilliant people who are true architects of systems, architects of ideas, and then engineers, like software engineers in this specific context, but people who really understand how to build repeatable, interoperable, forward-thinking, well-architected foundational platforms that allow for all kinds of flexibility and achievement in a business context. And so what I discovered when I started getting to know OCI is just a bunch of geniuses, these incredible geniuses. There's books on everybody's desks that they wrote, and their Medium links and their blog posts. And as I got to discover kind of the history of the company and how it came to be, and really get to know Dr. Moshiri, who I call the good doctor, a little bit more, then things like AI and things like object-oriented design and open source, platforms are in our DNA. So it's a 30-year-old company that has the most incredible product in the people, and also a really powerful purpose and vision for enabling technology that empowers. So it's my heart song, y'all. That's really kind of what called me to it. And in terms of the role, it is about two things, right? One is creating the conditions that allow for our team to continue to use that brilliance to innovate in service to the things that we care the most about, and then also being innovative with and for our clients. And I say it in that order because I think it's a lot about, an expression I like to use is mind the soil, right? So I grew up on a farm. So I'm from Texas originally, but I'm a small town farm girl. And I consider one of the greatest privileges of my upbringing the time that I spent with my hands in the soil. And one of the things I learned was that you have to first tend to the soil before you can even think about what you want to plant, and tending to the crop and thinking about, the care and feeding and the yield. So I consider the culture and the structure of an organization to be the soil, and we have to mind the soil. So that's why I mentioned the first part first, even though we exist in service to our clients.
So that's the condition. Are those the conditions upon which that you create to drive innovation? Does it start there, or are there other? What are the ways that you kind of set the tone or the atmosphere for innovation for your group?
Yeah. So it's always an evolving answer, right? Because I learn every single day. But to me, innovation is curiosity, right? It's founded in curiosity. It's founded in experimentation. But ultimately, it is about unlocking human ingenuity and connecting people and ideas and systems in service to a shared purpose. So in order to do that, we have to put the people first. And that means minding the soil. And that context is, what are the conditions that we need to create? And what is the space we need to hold for people to bring their full selves and have access to that creative energy, and then have the trust that allows them to share it and build on it together. So yeah, that is the conditions. That's a good word.
So you've worked with hundreds of businesses throughout your career across the different, firms that you've worked in, some of which have likely been very innovative and others that maybe remained stagnant and stuck. So what have you observed that makes businesses have the ability to, some have the ability to innovate while others don't?
Yeah, so one of the questions or observations, I guess, that I made over time is really the question of, how do we treat failure? How do we respond to failure? And ultimately, I would have said several years ago, what is our risk tolerance? But we demonstrate our risk tolerance by how we respond to failure. One of the concepts that I have embraced over time, it wasn't mine originally, but is the concept of a face plant, right? So we should experience and celebrate. You're familiar with a yard sale? I don't know if either of you are downhill skiers, but if you like to ski,
Yes.
then you know what a yard sale is. Your skis and your poles and your mittens and everything is up the hill because you just tumble down and it's all behind you. And so that yard sale moment, if we are not far enough out over our skis to expect and laugh about and celebrate a yard sale, then I would challenge whether we've created the space for innovation.
Yeah, it sounds like, that really does speak to culture. If people are afraid to make a mistake based on previous responses to that, that's really going to affect their ability or their desire to put themselves out there like that.
Right. And I think so often there's a big disconnect between how we perceive ourselves and then how we show up when it comes to the conditions for innovation. So as an example, we can say, we want to fail forward fast and we're agile and we do this and it's okay, go all in. And then when something goes differently than expected, all of our conditioned thinking and all of our conditioned behaviors attack us, right? And we hunker down, right? We make our governance processes more restrictive, and it's a natural thing because of the situations and conditions that we all have grown up in corporate environments and otherwise. But those are the opportunities to bring curiosity and to even laugh about that. Oh my gosh, so now I'm in a situation where I have to approve a $7 expense. I have let go of all materiality thresholds and logical thinking because I was coming from a place of fear because something went wrong.
What does celebrating, failure look like? I mean, what does that look like? Not just with you yourself, but if you think about an organization, kind of embracing this so that they can truly learn from it, it seems like it would require making sure everyone knows this happened, what happened, and doing it in a way that is celebrating as opposed to, demeaning, I guess. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I think I love what you just said because it is about that. It's about transparency. Let's dispassionately declare the face plant or the yard sale and say, this is what happened, and acknowledge the cost of that experimentation and just lay it out there, for all to see, and then celebrate the learning, because there are always phenomenal learnings in failure.
True.
I remember early in my career at Ernst & Young, and Dave, this might resonate with you. Wow, y'all. I mean, I was way out over my skis. I was very young. I had been through my ambitious, nature, especially at the time. I was responsible for a pretty large financial services account and had built a pretty good book of business and had several teams doing finance transformation work and other things. And I missed something that was pretty significant. Didn't communicate correctly with the client, didn't put the right assumption in the statement of work. And it was a $2 million mistake. To do the right thing by the client, it was going to cost the firm $2 million. And I remember going to my then partner, and I just walked in and I was like, hey, like, this is what happened. This is on me. This is what it's going to cost. And here's the path to black. Like, this is how I'm going to get us back to good. But we have to eat this because it's the right thing for the client. And I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, maybe to get fired, maybe to have the account pulled, like something really bad. And he looked at me, shook his head, asked like 2 questions and said, thanks for telling me. Go fix it.
Wow.
And it was one of the greatest gifts of my career because it helped me not to have that fear of going on. Mm-hmm. So it's leader behaviors. You know, I told that story because it's a lot about leader behaviors.
Yeah. And I also, when you think about that, I think it's important for, I don't know what the right words are, but I'm a little bit more experienced in my career, I guess. Is that the proper way to say it? But basically back in the day,
I like that.
Back in the day.
Me too.
Thank you. Yeah. So back in the day, I screwed up a lot. And I think it's important for younger professionals today to realize you don't have to be perfect. You are, because I see anxiety and so much fear in the under 25 generation. And I think it's important for people like us to come out and say, yeah, you're going to screw up and that's okay. You should do everything in your power for that not to happen. But you got to be okay when that does happen. And you got to realize you get up just like you did, dust yourself off. Hopefully you've got some people around you that recognize the learnings and recognize that's going to happen, which I think you'll find more often than not to be the case, and then move forward from there. So, but that's kind of an interesting segue into, let's talk about Arch Grants for a little bit. So I know you're very passionate about supporting Arch Grants, which is a nonprofit focused really on launching companies and entrepreneurs and those types of things. So tell us a little bit about the program, kind of how did you get connected with that? And then, so I think Arch Grants is now over 250 companies that have been sort of not created by, but facilitated with Arch Grants. Is there a favorite or two of yours out of the 10 plus years of Arch Grants companies that have come out?
That's a huge question. That's a huge question.
You're asking her to choose among her children.
That's right.
Right, exactly. So I've been involved with Arch Grants coming up on 4 years now as part of the board. And y'all, it is a phenomenal organization. I truly cannot say enough. I have so much respect for the founders, and it's so life-giving, right? Because you get constant exposure to innovative ideas. And, our tagline is champion the bold, which is, I believe, is exactly what we do. And we have, over the time that I've been involved, become ever more mindful of attracting truly diverse founders. So we've always done a great job of, we talk about attract companies being from outside the St. Louis region, because our mission is to basically build the future economy of St. Louis and of the world, ultimately by the model that we set, and many other cities have replicated it. But the numbers to me are, I have a lot of pride, even though I've contributed very little compared to many other people in making it happen. But, it's almost $1 billion in revenue generated by Arch Grants companies at this point. And if you think about how early these early stage startups are, that's staggering. And the fact that Arch Grants has only been around since 2012, and $750 million in follow-on capital attracted into St. Louis, right, by these companies. And just in wages alone, right, over $200 million in wages paid to St. Louis residents. So anyway, that's my little brag. I had to go there. In terms of favorites, my gosh, I have so many.
The hard part.
That's impossible. Yeah, that's impossible.
Maybe just a couple that you admire that are doing really innovative things.
Yeah. So top of mind for me today, just because of the conversations I've had in the last few days, there's a company called Inclusively. I don't know if either of you are familiar, but Charlotte and Sarah are the founders of Inclusively. Check it out. I believe it was Charlotte whose sister was the first licensed esthetician in Florida who had Down syndrome. And so Inclusively is an AI-powered platform. I think of it as like the LinkedIn for differently abled people, but it's able to take all of the accommodations that corporations already have in place, and then the things that they might not have visibility to, and match everything up, and then provide the training and the enablement. Inclusively is just it's a cool concept. It's a cool platform. They do a great job of telling the story. I love the mission and the underlying purpose, because I believe building from the edges is the best way that we can truly be mindful and diverse and inclusive, but also effective. So that's one of my stories.
So you mentioned AI, so let's kind of go into that. I know you're scheduled to be part of a panel discussion soon, navigating the AI frontier. Tell us about that and how you landed there.
So by no means am I an expert, and certainly not even one of the experts on AI.
Is anybody an expert on AI yet?
I mean, sure. You'd be surprised. Some of the folks, Yashi Chen and Andy McGovern, people that I'm working with right now, I learned so much cool stuff from every day, and they're so deep. And the things that they conceptualize of and build are just like beyond even my ability to comprehend. So I try to stay in my lane and really translate that to what is the business application, and how can that be part of the technology that empowers, right? What I would say is this: like, AI is everywhere, and it is for everyone. And almost all of the executives that I spend time with are grappling with the same thing, right? Which is like, what does it mean to me, and where do I start? And some people are only thinking that direction because, if they're public and their boards are asking them, or the analyst community is grilling them. And some of them are leaning in that direction because they are the curious, open-minded, entrepreneurial kind of leaders that just want to know what's next and are leaning in. But I've landed on, an answer to the question of where do we start? And to me, it's two places, right? It's, where does it hurt? Right? Where does it hurt? Where are the biggest pains in your business right now that are impacting either your operational efficiency or your ability to grow top line, or what have you, which translates differently, obviously, across different industries. And then think big, right? And that usually, that's a harder thing for a lot of executives to do, which is to think about, to use the term that I love that you all have framed up this season, future-proofing your business. Like, what does that mean, and what does that look like? And a lot of times that is, what will our customer look like 10 years from now? What will our macro, economic picture be? What, as industries blur together, how are we going to see our market opportunity differently? And then in all of that context, how can we think big about our client experience? In that context.
Does AI help you do that? Like, how does AI help with innovation?
Oh my gosh, I think AI, well, first of all, with generative AI, it's incredible to me now that we truly it can generate content, and anything that you can conceptualize of, it will double down on and extrapolate, in all forms of media, right? So yes, I think it can help with that brainstorming and help with that activity. But it also, like, in going through that ideation exercise, it brings you back to leveraging AI, architecting for AI, and then leveraging AI to architect for the future. We no longer have the luxury of our most valuable resource, which is our people, doing work that can be automated. Like, it's a huge mistake, right? The companies that miss that memo will be, I mean, the pace of Fortune 1000 companies being disintermediated and just going away has never been faster. So it's not really optional to leverage it on the where does it hurt side of the business. But it's fun and cool to lean into what the future holds too.
So I could see where, because of the fact that it generates ideas based on inputs and stuff, that you could almost like use it as a crutch for innovation, where it really needs to be kind of a catalyst for people to get ideas and innovate. Like, the AI can't be the innovator, but it can catalyze innovation. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Okay.
That is very well said. And There's a lot that goes into it, right? One of our values at OCI is to innovate courageously and mindfully. Like at the end of the day, all the data came from somewhere and started somewhere, which means all of our human bias and all of our conditioned thinking, it's in it, like it's embedded.
Right.
And so there is, I think that's where some of the fear comes from and some of the trepidation about how to lean into AI and how to leverage it in the business comes from, because we need to do it mindfully. But at the same point, like you're kidding yourself if you think that, students aren't using ChatGPT to help write their essays. You're kidding yourself if you don't think that every person in your organization is using some form of AI, and at this point, generative AI for something. Mm-hmm. So it's whether we allow for it or not, it's going to happen anyway. Right. So we are better served to lean into how it can serve us and our mission.
So we're visiting today with Stefanie Thelen, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Object Computing, Inc. So Stefanie, when I think about kind of the conversation that we just had, part of, it is shocking to me. And there was a study that was just released last month that despite 18 months of hype about ChatGPT, that still over 3/4 of the population have not tried ChatGPT or another AI tool. And, when I think about that and how critical AI is going to be and how much innovation is going to exist around that, I guess, what do you think for people who haven't taken that leap yet, who haven't tried some of these tools? I guess, what would you encourage them to do or think about, or where would you suggest they start?
It's a great question. It depends on whether, when we're talking about an individual, for personal use and how it can, help to ease things that we do in our day-to-day lives versus an organization. But I think that's where, we talked about culture and we talked about leaning in. Are we actively providing not only the tools, like full access to the tools, which gives us the ability to get ahead of the governance and, the mindful approach to it, True. But also are we giving people examples of things that they can be leveraging AI tools for? And, whether it's the Microsoft direction or leaning into open source, which I'm a big believer in, because there are many tools that are at parity now with some of the more well-known and popular tools. Like, I think we have to put it in the hands of the people before they know they need it, and then provide the leadership and support to kind of guide how that's used. Because you're right, it is a little bit bifurcated, and I didn't know the statistics. I'm actually really surprised.
I was too.
I was shocked. I'm a little blown away. Yeah. A little blown away by that.
Yeah, I was shocked by it as well. But that's actually, when you think about that, so what are the use cases? Like when you think about, okay, if you're just starting out, like, are you seeing a couple of use cases like emerging as, hey, these are probably, if you're going to get started or, you're on the journey, these are probably the 2 or 3 areas that if you're not doing these, you really need to look, into them.
Yeah. So the generic answer to that, right, and the one that's been around now, the first practice or capability area that I helped to stand up that leveraged AI as we know it today was almost 15 years ago, right? So it's been around for more than a hot minute. And that was preventative maintenance, right, in the manufacturing space. Now, what it looks like today and what it looked like then are very different. But the reason I say, like, where does it hurt as a way of thinking about the starting point is because, it can be preventative or targeted maintenance, in asset heavy industries. It can be asset utilization. And asset utilization is not just, are my assets in use? It's, are my assets, in the best use in service to my customers and, optimizing growth and profitability for the business. It's, dynamic and optimized pricing, right? It's used extensively in that space when you think about, something a little closer to the customer.
Sure.
And then basic, SKU optimization, but also personalization. So how we're developing our future product suite in service to and in concert with our customers. I could give probably 100 use cases. I don't know, to be perfectly candid, like what the most common are. Automation in the data and operational process space is probably the most widely adopted at this point. So if you're not doing something in that space, I think it's a really good time to look at it. And it starts with, do you have the data that you need in a format that is digestible and actionable to make informed decisions about your business. It continues to surprise me how often the answer to that question is no, either because we don't have the marriage of operational and financial, data in real time, so we're not able to adjust, right? Or because we haven't extended that. It's in a mechanistic hierarchy. You know how it goes. There's still a lot of people who spend most of their time getting information manually, collating that information and providing it up so someone else can get the information manually, collate it and provide it up, and so on and so forth. So I hate to give the consultative answer of it depends, but to some extent it truly does. It truly does depend. And those to me are the right questions to be asking. But I promise you that the dollars and cents make sense. Like the business case and the value proposition is there in your business today. And it doesn't have to be you figuring it out or deciding, but find the people on your team who are the most curious, who are the most experimental, who, have driven and helped the organization adopt change in any context in the past, and task them with getting people, usually people younger than we are, y'all, together. And I realize I'm probably older than both of you, but still.
So kind of, I guess, to that point, are you seeing, like, in these companies that you're working with, kind of the emerging talent pool, right? How focused are they on, the AI and, technology? Is that what they're completely like wanting to dive into, or is there some still kind of an on-ramp there?
So, AI is to me, well, it's in some ways unlike any other technology evolution or advancement. In a lot of ways, it is exactly like every other technology evolution and advancement, and that, by itself or for its own sake, right? Like, we will always need architects, not just systems architects, but true systems thinkers, like solution thinkers. And the depth of capability, I think, that our younger people need to build to be able to see the big picture so that we're applying that in context is super important. So I wouldn't go out and target. So my son, my oldest child, is 21 years old, and he is at Drexel University in Philly, and he's studying computer engineering. And he has been a tinkerer, right, and a geek his whole life. So he was like spinning up AWS instances in the cloud when he was 5 years old, and building games and making music and playing games and learning languages and all that stuff. And I would say to the youngest, I guess, generation in our workforce, the same thing I say to my son, which is continue to ask why and continue to try to pull back and broaden your lens, right? So that you understand. It is a phenomenal tool, but it is in fact just another tool. And you will not serve yourself, and you will not serve the greater purpose for like human advancement and the betterment of the human experience if you are a hammer going around looking for a nail.
When I think about that, though, that is the exact opposite of what I think that generation, I don't know, has been raised to do, or it's sort of where they go, which is tell me what to do and I'll do it. And, give me a list of tasks and I'll execute the tasks. And that's all well and good, and you should do that. But to your point, that ability to step back and really think about why, what is happening here? How do these pieces fit together? Kind of all of those types of things. But I do have a question for you. So we've heard different answers to this question or topic. In your mind, when you think about innovation and kind of where it spawns, where it comes from, you got one school over here that says, well, really, it's the creative executives who have deep, deep experience in the industry or whatever. They're the ones that can come up with the ideas. Over here, you've got another camp, which is no. You're people that are actually doing the work. They're the ones that your best ideas will come from. So in your experience, I guess, what's your take on that? Is either camp right? Is it somewhere in between? What's your point of view on that?
So my point of view is it comes from high-performing teams. High-performing teams that have a deep level of trust and that are diverse in their experience level and their background and their really in everything, in their thinking, which comes down to culture and lots of other aspects of diversity. But the most diverse, most high performing teams are the best incubators for innovation, in my experience and opinion. I don't know. So I think that might have been, I don't know if I heard the story verbally or if I read it in a leadership book 1,000 years ago, but there's a story about Henry Ford and the automobile. And like the biggest impediment to scaling the production of the automobile was the weight. And he had given this problem to his most senior engineers, like individually and in groups all at once. And they just kept coming back to him and saying, it's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible. And so, just out of desperation, he went to his newest, most junior engineers and gave them the same problem. And in like a week, they came back and were like, this is what we need to do. And so the automobile as we knew it, was born from people with almost no experience, right?
Yeah.
I tell that story because I have learned the most from the youngest folks that have been on my teams in the last several years. But what I've found is tremendously purpose-driven young people who are willing to work hard, who do want to know why.
They're more purpose-driven.
I'm nothing but like energized and inspired by our up and coming generation.
So Stefanie is a self-admitted geek. So now you're at an organization where you've got a bunch of geeks around you and you're seeing all this new breakthrough technology. So I guess what's the one or two things that you're seeing that your teams are working on that you're like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever? Is it the GIS mapping stuff? Is it the AI related stuff? What's the coolest thing that you're looking at?
That's so hard because the coolest thing to me is always how all the pieces fit together. So like I didn't really have an appreciation for open source like I thought I did. But open source, like the more that I've learned about it and the more that I've seen the incredible contributions across multiple open source platforms that OCI has made over its history, and the better I understand why it matters, like the more inspired I am by that. So I'm really leaning into like what we're doing for the Unity Foundation. There's so many different things I could speak to, but I think what it comes down to is when we exhale and let our fear turn to excitement, because it's really the same energy, and we appreciate that there really is abundance and that we really all can benefit, and that includes profitability in the context of conscious capitalism, and we let more go, it gives us the ability to focus deeply on what we want to be great at. But it also means that we make so much more progress so much faster. So it's not the most, I guess, technical answer I could have offered based on some of the cool stuff that we're doing, but it is the thing that I get the most jazzed about. And every time there's people in a conference room talking about what they're designing and how it leverages open source and how they're working with partners who you would not ever think of as being open source oriented, I always like find a chair in the corner and just sit and listen and learn and get my energy up.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Missy to wrap us up with the Make It Count segment.
Okay.
Perfect.
So in this segment, we ask you if there's one actionable takeaway that other business leaders can count on. And if you want to think about this, in the context of innovation, that would be great. So any advice that you have?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Hard to pick one.
hard to pick one. I think I'm going to give you two. I'll let you pick one.
Great.
The first, I'm going to go back to the first thing I said, which is mind the soil. Mind the soil. Mm-hmm. So know that there is nothing that matters more than culture. And if you are not continuing to work on yourself and your own growth and your own leader behaviors and how you show up, then the chances are there's more work you can do to mind the soil. So that would be number one.
So that's number one. Okay. What's number two?
Number one. And then number two is start. Whatever fear you're feeling in your body, like lean into it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's just the decision that something is more important. So when it comes to specifically AI, but also just innovative technologies and how to leverage technology to grow your business, start. Think about where it hurts and think about what you can't imagine being able to do and get people in a room together and start. We got to go, y'all. It's time to go.
Awesome. Well, Stefanie, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time with both of you. It was fun.
Thank you for joining the But Who's Counting podcast. Make sure to never miss an episode by subscribing on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and let us know what you think by rating and reviewing. Keep up with more Anders CPAs and Advisors insights by following us on social media through the handles in the show notes. We'll see you next time.